Second segment that I'm conducting here with one of my, well, he's the intermediate belt. He's the green belt. He's one of my students. Been my students for quite a while, many years. He left and came back, and he's back now, and he's been training in the art for several years. The reason, again, why I'm bringing these segments is that I want to share with the audience and martial artists and non-martial artists the understanding and constant principles of martial arts and why it's effective in circumstances, no matter what your confrontation is. Martial art is geared towards overcoming every obstacle. That's what it's geared for, and it doesn't matter of size, weight, nationality, creed, what have you. It's dealing with the issue. It deals with solving a problem, and that problem is self-defense, and not only defending yourself but defending others, and even in some principles it's talk about defending the opponent or the adversary. So in this instance, my brother Salik had a incident, and I was there. I'm into security for so many years, and we had a security matter here at the mosque, and myself and Salik and other my students and security personnel had to address it. So I'm going to allow him to convey what the situation was. We had what we call a emotional disturbed person. EDP, they call it in legal and law enforcement jargon. And in that, this person is known to be very violent. And he's have schizoid, did you say?
Schizoaffective.
Schizophrenic. And he has an extreme case of it, because this is a person that he has voices and so forth. And we already had a encounter with him where he got really physical with one of the members here at the masjid. And we had to escort him out and so forth. But this time, he resisted. He didn't want to leave and so forth. So I'm going to let Salik explain to you his motive. Now, I'm there with him, and I'm engaging him and trying to reason with him in respect to leaving and getting out. But he refused and leaving the masjid. But he refused. So I'm on one side. I'm in front of him, and Salik is on another side, and we had to engage him. I gave, after he refused, after trying to reason with him, it came to a point where he became very belligerent, because the brother just touched him, and he became very sporadic. He became irritated. So at that point, we knew that it could escalate, because once they get to that point, there's no stopping them. It just escalates to a point of danger. So I'm going to let Salik inform the audience what was his state of mind and the technique that he had applied. So Salik.
Assalamu alaikum. So again, as Professor Ali has spoken, I've been training him for a number of years. I stepped away for a moment to take care of some personal matters, but I'm back, and I've been back training with him now for a few months, or a couple of months. And within that process, I was really just observing to get familiar with my surroundings that I had moved away from, and to allow the professor to get a chance to know me and to make sure that I was still in alignment with his teachings. And three of the core principles of his teaching is focus, commitment, and determination. And when you execute utilizing those principles, you're able to do it in a way causing least harm to yourself as well as to others if you're faced with a situation. Yesterday, unfortunately, we had an individual here during the evening prayer time that was determined. For one, I happen to be a clinical social worker, so I understood what the individual was experiencing, and I was able to make a quick assessment and diagnosis, determined that this brother was suffering from voice hearing, and it wasn't just voice hearing, but it was command voice hearings. And as the professor was trying to reason with him, because this individual had placed his hands on other Muslims, in prior occasions while making prayer, trying to reason with him, it was determined that this individual was not open to reason. It wasn't to his own fault. Again, he suffers from a mental illness, something called schizoaffective, where people have command auditory hallucinations, severe paranoia. So the first job is not to agitate the individual beyond where he's already agitated based on these command auditory hallucinations. Once it was determined that the professor was unable to reason with him, then I was looking for him for the command, because again, the discipline is not moving before you give him the command. And we made eye contact. There's no visual communication. It's really eye contact, something we learned years ago from the training, and that we had to execute on a number of occasions, when we were dealing with other issues. Nevertheless, the point is, once I got the command, I simply went into a technique that's called the sleeper hold. And it's when you get behind an individual and you wrap take one arm and put it under him, and you reach behind his neck and you take the other arm and you put it around his neck, and you start to squeeze. Now you have to be very mindful when you squeeze, because you do not want to kill the individual. And you have to be at a certain, when he's at the point where he's asleep, and you no longer need to apply that pressure. Once that was determined and the individual was subdued and brought down, there were other security forces that were trained by the professors. There was no handcuffs or anything that needed to be used. A brother simply straddled him. He was instructed to put his hands behind his back as if he was handcuffed. And I stayed in the front of him with my hands just holding his head down and one hand on the ear. And at that time he was already asleep. However, it takes only about a minute or a minute and a half before the individual wakes up. And when he wakes up, he's usually in a state of hysteria. And we want to make sure that he didn't harm himself and we didn't harm him while during this state. So once it was determined, and the professor called the police, and he used the term EDP, which means an emotionally disturbed person, they responded quickly with EMS, because then we realized we have a person that's experiencing psychotic symptoms where he's detached from reality. And the police come, no one else was hurt, the individual wasn't hurt. They took him to the hospital, and hopefully he was assessed and determined what assistance he needed in order to stabilize him, so that at one point he could return to the community. However, because this individual has caused problems before and has put his hands on other people, unfortunately we will not be able to allow him to come back here. But we want to do everything we can to assist him. And again, based on the instructions and the teachings of Professor Ali, we were able to do this in a way where no one was harmed and the individual was getting the help that he needs.
Thank you, sir. So this is the whole point, and respect, and I just like to actually, pose a question to you. What do you think about what role did the martial art training, as well as your expertise on the social and psychological aspect of your expertise, what role did the martial art play in subduing that person?
Well, again, I'm missing three principles. One being discipline. One not moving before you are given a command or order. And I knew at some point something needed to be done, but it wasn't for me to make a determination. The discipline is in following the order, following the command. And once the professor and I made eye contact, and we realized the individual was not going to be reasonable, rational, and again, no fault of his own, because he was experiencing a psychotic break. Once we determined that, then I had to wait until the command was given. And that's one thing that it teaches us in here, and that involves the way we move, the way we think, foot movement, eye contact. You do it all in a very disciplined and orderly manner. And commitment, knowing that once you make a decision to engage, you commit to that. You commit to that. And most importantly, there's been many instances where individuals were not committed, and they went to subdue a person, and he wasn't subdued in a manner where he was no longer a threat. Where he was no longer a threat. And people make a mistake of disengaging too soon, as if it's over. You've seen people after a fight, they get up and they dance around and they act like it's a game, and etc. And the individual gets up and comes after them, and they end up being on the other side. So the art of ninjutsu that we learn, and the disciplines that we learn, allow us to execute in a way causing the least harm for the individual, as well as for those who may be surrounded. Our intention is not to hurt. People think when we see a martial artist that all we want to do is just lame and hurt a person. We don't. We want to control the situation. And this ninjutsu, the art of ninjutsu, teaches you about control, self-control, control of your mind, control of your body, and control of the resources that Allah has provided us with. And that's the tools, our hands, our feet, our thinking. And when you execute in that manner, then you are able to do a job with good outcome and results.
Very good. And what Sadiq had just conveyed to you is the principles that we operate under. And those principles and years of training and years of instilling this particular principle, and at the same time ingraining this and just continue to reinforce these principles in what we do. When you actually execute, or when you're in a real situation, in a real combat situation, you're able to adapt to whatever the case is. It's just like we were saying before about, Bruce Lee. He spoke about adaptation in the martial arts. He talked about being water, adapt. Water takes the form of any contents that it comes in contact with. It takes that form. Be water, my friend. That's what he said. And this is what we do. So Saliq's martial arts training required him to use discretion. He was very discreet about what he was going to apply in that situation. It didn't come to a point where he had to pound on him or had to strike him. He knew, he assessed the situation, and he created an environment was the least dangerous to the people, surrounding people, and to the person himself, and to others. So he applied the technique in a manner that created the person to be composed and be subdued. And then afterwards we were able to apply and like he said, when the person recovered, we had the person subdued. We had the proper submissive locks on him. He was on the ground, and we had him face down, and we had him suppressed. And when a human being feels suppressed, where he has no other way to go, they have no other choice but to be composed, and to be peaceful and submissive. And that's the nature of our art. That's the nature of most art. But ninjutsu has another approach. It's like, and it's not saying it's the best of all martial arts, but it's the highest form of martial arts. And like you've seen, my brother here has been around for a long time, and other students that you heard that I've brought to this the audience. The first brother, Samson, spoke about his incident. So the main thing is that I'm bringing this to you because I get a lot of detractors and naysayers saying this is not going to work, that's not going to work. So what I do is when now I document what's happening with my students in real time, in real combat, and then I ask them what techniques did they apply, and they give credence to the training and to the system that they're under. And I wanted to share that with the audience. So that's why I always tell the naysayers, I have no time for negative input. If you have some positive input, bring it on. But when you start criticizing, when you start predicting, and you start, when you start saying things that you have no knowledge of, and when you start to denigrate and try to defame my teacher and try to defame my system, then I have no time for your input. Your input can go somewhere else, because the proof is in the real time circumstances, and the proof is in the testimonies of my students and myself. I've been so many years in this world, and I've applied my techniques based on my teacher teachings. So I just wanted to bring that to you. Thank you for your time, and in the future and afterwards, Saliq and the other students are going to apply and exhibit the techniques that they applied to that situation. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Well, excellent.